to go to the Philistines because they were under them. And Samson, as he got older, God was calling him to be a judge of the people of Israel. This was before they ever had any kings. And the judges were people who led the people. They mediated disputes. They passed out justice, who was right and who was wrong. And they dealt with all these things. But they also, from time to time, delivered their people, Israel, from the other nations that oppressed them. Because Israel kept going after idols. They'd say, we love you, Jesus, we love you, God. And then they'd go off and they'd worship idols for a while. And the judge would come along and he would bring them back. And then they'd go off and worship idols for a little while. And the judge would come along and bring them back. So here is Samson. Samson grows up to be an adult man. And I'm going to have to skip over a lot of the exciting things that he did. But not all of them. I'm not going to skip over all of them. Well, let me tell you. One time when he was a man, he killed a lion with his bare hands. And one time he battled 1,000 Philistines with just a donkey jawbone. And he beat them all by himself. But one day, Samson was walking along. And he kind of sometimes went out looking for trouble. And Samson was walking along, and he saw, in Philistine territory, a beautiful woman. And he went, oh. And he decided that he wanted her for himself. He saw with his eyes this beautiful lady, and he said, I want her. And her name was Delilah. And Samson began to go pay visits to Delilah. Now, Delilah was a prostitute. And you can ask your parents more about this at home. But a prostitute was someone you could pay to spend time with you. And Samson paid to spend time with her, and he went to see her. Now, she was a Philistine. And the leaders of the cities of the Philistines came to her and they said, you've got him right here, because they were mad at him for beating up on 1,000 men and for all the trouble he caused them. And they said, find out what the secret of his strength is. See if you can get him to tell you. And then we can get him and we'll kill him. And so one day, Samson is there with Delilah. And he's laying there on the couch and she's stroking his head and saying sweet things to him. Samson, sweetie, what makes you so strong and awesome? Samson was a bit of a stinker. And he said, oh, well, that's easy. If you were to take 7 new bowstrings, the kind of strings you put into a bow and arrow, if you were to take 7 new unwashed bowstrings, and you were to tie me up with those, I would be as weak as any other man. And Samson fell asleep there, and she went to the door and said, 7 new bowstrings, 7 new bowstrings. Again, if you tie him up with that, he won't be able to beat anybody. And so while he was asleep, they came in and Delilah tied him up with 7 new bowstrings. And they were all gathered around there, and then she said, Samson, sweetie, the Philistines are here to get you. And Samson leapt up, and he ripped those bowstrings off, and he and he ran away. And then he came back, because he just couldn't get enough of Delilah. And he came back a little while later, and she said, in her best pouty voice, Samson, you don't even love me at all. Why, you told a trick on me. What is it that makes you so strong? Come on, don't lie to me. And he said, well, if you plaited my hair into a braid and put a pin in it, then I would be weak like any other man. Do you think he told her the truth? She did the exact same thing. Samson, sweetie, the Philistines are here to get you. And he leapt up and bam, bam, bam. And he ran away and they didn't get him. And then he came back again. Samson, very foolish. And she said, and she really, really let him have it this time. You don't love me at all. You've never loved me. You don't care about me. I don't even know if I want to see you anymore. She laid it on thick. And she kept at it. She kept whining at him and nagging at him. And finally, he just got sick of it. And he told her the truth. He said, if you were to shave my head with a razor, because my hair has never been cut because I'm consecrated to God, then I would become weak like any other man. And so, when he slept, as he always did, she shaved his head. And then she said, Samson, sweetie, the Philistines are here to get you. And he jumped up and went bam, bam, bam. But nothing happened. And they got him. Those Philistines, they got him, And the first thing they did was they tied him up and they gouged out those 2 eyes of his that got him in trouble in the first place. And they took him off to jail. And they put him there in the dungeon, and he had to turn the wheel that ground the grain for them. And every day there, blind old Samson, who had been so powerful in destroying his people's enemies, there he was in the grain field, grinding up that grain instead of a donkey. And the Philistines just thought this was the funniest thing. But they weren't paying too close of attention, because they forgot to keep his hair cut. Or maybe they didn't know that he had to keep it short. And so Samson's hair began to grow out again. And then one day after he'd been there in that place for a long time, and his hair had gotten long and wild again, the Philistines had a big party to celebrate. And they wanted to bring him out so that they could laugh at him and mock him, a little bit of entertainment for them. And so they brought out Samson, who was old and beaten up now, and who was weak and weary, and he looked pitiful and shriven and shrunken. And they had a boy lead him up, and there he is, blind, his eyes gouged out, there in front of everybody, and they start to laugh and they start to make fun of him. "Where are you now, strong man? Huh?" And they began to poke fun and to laugh. And Samson said to the boy, he said, "I'm old and tired. Could you just help my hands find the pillars that hold up the house so I can rest against them?" And so the boy led him right there to where he could feel the pillars of the house between his hands. And he stood there. And he said, he made a prayer to God. He said, "Lord, help me to get vengeance for my people and on account of my 2 eyes." And he made this prayer to God, and then he went, and he brought the whole house down. The last thing Samson did as judge of Israel was to bring down the house of the Philistines. His 2 eyes got him into a lot of trouble, didn't they? And he lost those 2 eyes as a result. His whole sight became dark. And that's what we heard about in the gospel today. If what you see is darkness, it will lead you to darkness. If what you see is light, it will lead you to light. And it's not so much a matter of what you look at as what you allow to enter into your heart through your eyes. Now, there are certainly some things that you ought not to look at, period, that are not really proper for a Christian person to take in. There are all kinds of things that you can think of that might go into this category, pornography or things like this, that one ought never to look at. But really, it's what you let in through the eyes that then either lightens or darkens your heart, and either makes you blind or gives you illumination, the wisdom of God. And so we see in the example of Samson this truth played out. Samson is an epitome of the people of Israel. He's an epitome and a small embodiment and encapsulation of that story. Because he loved what was not meant to be his. Because he loved something that was not meant for him and turned away from the law of his God. He lost his eyes. He became blind, just as the people of Israel surely lost their way with idols and then were sent away into slavery. But God did not forsake Samson, nor did he forsake his people utterly. Even blind, weakened, shrunken, old, pitiful Samson was not forsaken and forgotten by God. God reached him even in his old and decrepit state, just as he reached the people of Israel, blinded in their own idolatry, and then later blinded in their own self-righteousness. God did not ever forsake them in that state. Even in their dotage and their blindness, he came to them in the person of Christ, not simply to give them vengeance, but to restore their sight, to give them new eyes. And you think of that story of the man that he did give new eyes. He came to give them new eyes new sight, to heal them of all their foolishness, of all their recklessness, of all their mistakes, to make them his people again, to make them new. And that is exactly the same thing that he does for us today. He has made you part of his kingdom, his church, his people. He has grafted you, the Gentiles, into this vine, into this family. He has come to make you new, to take away your blindness, to give you life. And on Father's Day, this day when we celebrate and remember fatherhood, I can't imagine any better gift that I could give you than to remind you, fathers, to take in light. To take in light through your eyes so that what you see illumines you. What you become is light and life. So that you can, as a father, bestow this upon your family. Because we saw this week what happens when you take in a lot of darkness. And the darkness consumes you. And then you want to pull other people down into that death that you're in. We saw this week what that is like. And we don't want to go that way. But there are only two ways. The way of light and life and the way of darkness and death. And so, men of God, in this community, take in life. Take in light. Draw into yourselves all that is good and holy and righteous and pleasing to God, so that you may then pour it out on your families, on those that you love, on those that you work with and serve, so that all around you may be light. God bless you this morning.